Chapter 9: Applications in Other Poor Countries. Our success in Bangladesh led me to hope that our microcredit methodology could have near universal applicability. During the late 1980s and early 1990s, we proved that the Gramean idea could improve the lives of poor people throughout the world. Pilot projects in Malaysia and the Philippines led the way. I met Professor David Gibbons, a Canadian who had been living and teaching in Malaysia for more than 20 years, at a conference near Dhaka in 1985. David had been advocating the expansion of credit access in rural Malaysia, but was discouraged by the response or lack of response among policymakers. He asked me whether he and a colleague might come and spend a month at a Gramean branch. I agreed. David came to Bangladesh with Shukor Kasim, a junior colleague who would later become one of the most dedicated promoters of microcredit in Malaysia and around the world. The two spent several weeks in Rangpur shadowing as a Dayan, a zonal manager in one of the poorest areas of Bangladesh. They stayed in villages and toured bank branches. On returning to Dhaka, David and Sukur announced their intention to establish a Grameen program in Malaysia. I fully supported their plan. When David launched Project Ikhtiar, a Grameen program in Malaysia, in 1897, he encountered challenges on two fronts: building a Grameen program from scratch and finding an appropriate legal framework to distance the program from governmental control without losing financial support. It was quite a balancing act. David was lucky to have Sukur, a true disciple, DISCIPLE, a true disciple, as well as Mike Getuvic of the Asia and Pacific Development Center APDC, who provided seed funding in the early stages of the Malaysia program and later helped fund two of the earlier Grameen replication programs in the Philippines. When problems piled up, David came back to Grameen for refresher training. On one occasion, we sent a team of Nurjahan and Shah Alam, our senior staff, to assist him. Slowly, David and Shukor came to understand the logic of our methodology and modified their policies to more closely resemble ours. By the end of our 2-year experimental phase, they announced ambitious plans to expand to even less developed regions of northern Malaysia. Today, David and Sukur are at-large ambassadors for Grameen, working night and day to jumpstart Grameen programs in more than a dozen Asian countries. They have been instrumental in forming an association of Grameen replication programs called SHPOR, Cashpor, and as a result of their efforts, Amena Ikhtiar Malaysia now reaches more than 42,000 poor families, roughly half of Malaysia's population living under the poverty line. The Malaysian repayment rate is even higher than that of borrowers in Bangladesh. David also published a book, The Grameen Reader, a compilation of my essays and several of his own articles. This tremendously valuable guide has helped many people adapt our program in other countries. Even before the pilot phase of Project Ikhtiar was complete, serious Grameen replication projects began to crop up in a number of other countries. 3 of those showing the most promise were located in the Philippines. Dr. Generoso Octavio, an economics professor at the University of the Philippines at Los Baños, visited Bangladesh in 1989 and started a program in the villages outside his university soon thereafter. As I had joined the board of directors of the International Rights Research Institute with headquarters located a mere 2 miles from the Los Baños campus, I was able to visit Jean and his borrowers frequently. With his natural gift for relating to poor people, Jean did a terrific job of getting the project off the ground. Many of his borrowers successfully raised pigs, a very profitable business that is non-existent in Bangladesh due to Islamic prohibitions concerning the consumption of pork. At first, I thought that operating a Grameen-type lending program in the Philippines would be easier than doing so in Bangladesh, where the long-standing poverty, low status of women, and frequent natural disasters are more extreme. But Jean ran into trouble when, with my encouragement, he set his sights on expansion. He had a knack for working directly with borrowers. Knack, K-N-A-C-K, knack for working directly with borrowers. But he had more difficulty managing his staff and board of directors. Once his action research project was converted into an independent microcredit organization called Ahon Sa Hirop, Rise Above Poverty, or ASHI, ASHI, he struggled to establish a dependable management structure. After several years of internal battles within ASHI, he left to teach in Malaysia and subsequently became a microcredit consultant for several organizations with programs in Southeast Asia. At first, I worried about Ashish's future, but then two very fortunate things happened. First, Sukor Kashim stepped in as a consultant to rehabilitate Ashish's most troubled branch. Within a surprisingly short time, things began to look up. Second, an ASHI board member named Mila Marquedo volunteered to become the full-time executive director. Mila was a nonsense woman with a strong background in the private sector, excellent managerial skills, and a natural talent for working with poor women. Today, due to the efforts of Shukor, Mila, and the ASHI staff, ASHI is one of the most successful Grameen replication programs in the Philippines. Shortly after ASHI got started, I met Governor Daniel Lacson of the province of Negros Occidental, a sugar-growing region in the southern Philippines. We were both in Washington, D.C., attending a seminar held at the World Bank, and everyone was discussing the harm that bank-imposed structural adjustment policies were having on poor countries. When it came my turn to speak, I argued that the people losing jobs due to World Bank policies were the new poor, and that I was more concerned about the old poor, those who never had jobs in the first place. I did not condone the World Bank's approach, but I argued that the majority of the new poor would survive because they had support to fall back on, and I urged the attendees at the seminar to turn their attention to the old poor instead. I then offered the Grameen-style microcredit program as an example of how we could help these critical cases. Inspired by my talk, Governor Lacson sent Dr. Cecily D. Del Castillo, the director of a non-profit organization called the Negroes Women's for Tomorrow Foundation, to visit Graeme in Bangladesh. Like David Gibbons, Cecily learned everything she could about Graeme, and in August 1989 she launched a new program called Project Dungannon Integrity in Negroes Occidental. With her background in social work and her strong connections to international and national donor organizations, Cecily quickly built up an excellent program serving several thousand extremely poor borrowers. By the early 1990s, Project Dungannon had become the largest program of Cecily's foundation. CECILE. Cecily is a person here. The third Filipino program to emerge was the Landless People's Fund of the Center for Agriculture and Rural Development (CARD). CARD was established by Aris Elip and a number of energetic people from an organization called the Philippine Business for Social Progress. After visiting Graeme in Bangladesh, Aris decided to apply our methodology to rural development in the Philippines. One member of his staff, Dolores, D-O-L-O-R-E-S, Dolores Torres, known as Dory, D-O-R-Y, Dory, emerged as the real driving force in the organization. Within a short time, Aris and Dory surpassed ASHI and Project Dungannon to become. So Project Dungannon is spelled as Project Dungganon. Project Dungannon to become the leaders of a network of more than 30 Graeme replication programs in the Philippines. In 1997, by which time CARD had acquired more than 9,000 borrowers, an excellent repayment rate, and 7 branches, the staff took steps to establish the CARD Bank, an independent financial institution. By January 2003, CARD had grown to 69,000 borrowers. I was concerned that they were taking a big risk. Rather than base their framework on that of traditional financial institutions, I urged them to create a distinct legal framework from scratch, catering to the needs of microcredit programs. Despite its remarkable success, CARD did face some difficulties. In the early 1990s, I looked to the German government to provide it with expansion funding. One German government official responded that his agency considered CARD a failure. Confused, I asked him for the source of his information. He said that a thorough study had been done and everyone who read the report agreed that CARD was not worthy of funding. I asked him for a copy of the report, which he promised to send me. When I asked Dory about the German evaluation, she said that there had never been one. Then a few weeks later she called me to report that a German man, who had not identified himself as an evaluator for the German government, had visited with CARD staff in their head office. He had expressed no interest in visiting with borrowers. This was certainly our mysterious evaluator. I immediately called several people I knew in the German government, but was told that the report was confidential and that I would not be allowed to see it. Frustrated, I approached Dr. Mahabub Hussain, an independent researcher with an impeccable reputation. Impeccable, IMPECCABLE, impeccable reputation, to do a full evaluation of CARD, CARD, and then publish the findings. Mahabub agreed to write the evaluation for free. After many long months of painstaking research, he finally presented his findings at an international workshop in the Philippines in June 1997. This is what he discovered. Card borrowers are very poor. 70% of them are completely landless and own houses worth less than $550. Card borrowers use their loans for business. 97% of borrowed money is invested in income-generating activities. Card loans make a big difference. Borrowers' average rate of return on investment is 117%, 144% for borrowers who have taken 5 or more loans. Card generates jobs. Economic activities financed by card loans generated 163 days of employment for card borrowers each year and an additional 84 days for other family members. Card generates productive employment. The labor productivity in card finance businesses is 36% higher than the prevailing wage rate. I had not been expecting such a positive report. Card was obviously making a tremendous difference to thousands of poor people, transforming their lives even faster than we were able to do at Graeme. But despite Mahbub's findings and Card's success, the controversy about Grame's applicability outside of Bangladesh or even in the Philippines was not put to rest. Not put to rest. Put to rest. A new report released by the United Nations in 1998 repeated many of the old arguments about why micro-lending programs can work only in places with certain unique characteristics. The report argues that many people, especially the poorest of the poor, are usually not in a position to undertake an economic activity, partly because they lack business skills and even the motivation for business. Furthermore, it is not clear if the extent to which microcredit has spread or can potentially spread can make a major dent, a major dent in global poverty. Encouraged by the success of the programs in Malaysia and the Philippines, new programs continue to sprout up in India, Nepal, Vietnam, and elsewhere. Even China launched 3 programs in the mid-1990s. Then came Latin America and Africa with a program called the Small Enterprise Foundation (SEF), founded by John D. Witt in South Africa. John's program has been particularly successful, reaching thousands of poor borrowers in rural villages. One of his borrowers, Kate Mekaku, now makes a living by selling avocados, mangoes, bananas, cheese, snacks, and soft drinks from a small store. Before joining SEF, Katie sold her wares door to door. Katie sold her wares door to door, but she had very little capital, with severely limited profits. Katie's story is illustrative of the travails and successes in the third world outside of Bangladesh. Katie got into business when, shortly after her marriage, she realized that the money her husband sent home from his work in the mines was not enough to last her through an entire month. Rather than starve, she took the money and bought mealie meal, M-E-A-L-I-E, mealie meal. So here the term mealie meal is a corn meal, meaning dried corn or maize, milled or ground to a coarse meal. This is typical in South Africa. A mealie meal, a food staple in South Africa as well as avocados and sugar and sold them to people in her neighborhood. Her sales allowed her to squeak by, squeak, squeak by, but when her husband was injured at work and unable to return to the mines, Katie's situation became desperate. It was at about this time that she joined a SEF group. With her initial loan of $60, she made a down payment on a used refrigerator, allowing her to open a store. The other women in her group also set up small businesses. Sylvia Mowagi raises chickens and sells milk from her home. Grace Motlowsey is a fruit vendor. Masaku Masaku Manedzia sells paraffin and has a home-based sewing business. Rebecca Sivia brews beer. Even though her workday starts at 3 a.m., Katie is happy that her life is finally on the right track. Her customers clamor for the best-selling fat cakes, and business is brisk. B-R-I-S-K, brisk. Business is brisk. Brisk. Katie's latest loan was for $300 and she is having no trouble paying it back. She even has enough saved up to lend money to her husband for his new carpentry business. Though her work leaves her little extra time, Katie has enrolled in an literacy program. For the first time, she can now sign her own name. And the opportunity to catch up with borrowers like Katie always makes it difficult for me to decide which Grameen replication programs I should visit when I travel, the ones I have visited before to see how they have grown, or ones that I have not yet visited, to find out how various organizations have adapted our policies to their cultural context. We now send many middle-level and senior Grameen staff members to help people create new programs, alter existing ones, or expand. In our discussions with the first wave of Grameen replicators, we found that many organizations had a hard time mobilizing financial support for their activities. They needed funds to travel to Bangladesh for training, to start up their programs, and then to expand after the pilot phase. I urged replicators to look for sources of funding in their home country. The closer to their office, the better. That way, they would be able to keep all financial transactions in their country's currency and directly demonstrate the impact of their work to their funding agencies. But despite my encouragement and occasional intervention, I sometimes contacted agencies to recommend funding for particular countries. Some of the best programs kept coming up empty. One day I was complaining about the situation, billions of dollars for third world development, but none for dozens of good microcredit programs at a lecture in Chicago. During the question and answer session, or Q&A session, I elaborated on how difficult it was to start replication programs because of the lack of donor money. My suggestion was to create a branch of the Grameen Trust specifically for providing support to replication programs. If donors were satisfied with the use of their money, they could give us more. If they were unhappy with our performance, they could remove their support. As the question and answer period continued, I was handed a note from someone in the audience. It said, "Can I see you for a couple of minutes after your presentation?" I passed the note to Connie Evans, Executive Director of the Women's Self-Employment Project, who was sitting next to me. Immediately after the lecture, Connie ushered me into a small room. A woman was also shown in. How much money do you think you will need to start funding the replication projects? Asked the woman. A couple of $100,000 would be a good start, I answered. Will you have difficulty in finding replication projects to fund? Oh no, there are many that are waiting for money, I answered. And once we start funding, many more will come forward. How long will you be in town? Another 2 days, then I go to Washington. I'll try to give you a check for a couple $100,000 before you leave. Can I invite you to my home this evening so that you can meet a few of my colleagues and we can proceed with the processing of the grant? I looked at Connie and asked, "Can I go?" Connie was beaming with excitement. "How can I stop you from going to Adele Simon's home, particularly when she wants to give you a grant?" That evening we spent with Adele, Adele. Adele is a person, with Adele, the president of the MacArthur Foundation, and three of her colleagues, who agreed with Adele's decision to offer us a grant. As I had a hectic schedule for the next 2 days and no time to write a grant proposal, Adele assigned a staff member to hop into Texas with me, sit next to me during lunches and dinners, and develop a draft of the proposal during my stay. Within 2 days, the staff had written a proposal that satisfied the MacArthur Foundation. Adele Simon's decision to support the Graeme Trust jump-started us on our ambitious new replication program and encouraged other donors to follow suit. These included the Rockefeller Foundation, the World Bank, the US government, the UN Capital Development Fund, and the German government. In total, the Graeme Trust, which has been run by a former Chittagong University colleague and close friend of mine, H.I. Latifi, since 1994, has received more than $19.8 million. Virtually every cent has been used to support 65 Graeme replication projects in 27 countries. 27 countries! That is great. As of late 2002, these organizations have granted more than $444 million in loans to some 1,140,000 poor people. Graeme attracts potential replicators by inviting them to our international dialogue programs, 2 week-long conferences hosted by the Graeme Bank and Graeme Trust in Bangladesh 4 times each year. About 20 people from around the world attend each conference. After a few hours of orientation in our head office, we send these visitors in groups of 2 to far-flung branches throughout the country. They remain there for 5 days to learn as much as possible about the branch, its workers, its borrowers, and its socio-economic environment. They then undertake an in-depth interview with one Graeme borrower over several days. This allows them to see the direct impact of Graeme on a very human level. It also helps to break down the myths and prejudices the participants may have about poor people in Bangladesh, poor people in their home country, or poor people in general. When the dialogue participants return from the field, we encourage them to debate the merits and limitations of the Graeme approach. Toward the end of the 2 week period, we show them how to apply to the Graeme Trust for seed money to get their own program started. If they apply, we contact other replicators in their country for references. All of this is very inexpensive, but it allows us to weed out those who are not serious about starting a program true to the Graeme spirit. We see a tremendous demand for new funding and hope to reach 10 million borrowers through replication programs funded by the Grameen Trust by 2005. That goal will require roughly $2.2 billion. This may sound like a lot of money, but it is less than double the amount that an American friend of mine helped raise for his law school a few years ago. What? This may sound like a lot of money, but it is less than double the amount that an American friend of mine helped raise for his law school a few years ago. Wow. About 8 years ago, a fellow Bengali, Bengali, a fellow Bengali challenged me in a seminar. He said, Grameen once received loans at 2% interest. Any program in this country that gets loans at that rate can make a microcredit program work. I think he meant it as an accusation, implying that what we had accomplished was not a big deal, but I took it as a challenge to create a new institution that offered loans at 2% interest to any microcredit program in the country. I convinced the government to establish a non-governmental agency called the Polikarma Shayak Foundation (PKSF), which has since made loans to 156 microcredit programs throughout the country. I was appointed to the board of directors after PKSF established a track record and methodology that felt comfortable. I supported the proposal that the foundation receive funding from the World Bank. In 1998, the World Bank approved a $105 million loan to PKSF, one of its largest investments in microcredit ever. Now I believe that several microcredit wholesalers like PKSF should be set up in every country so that they can compete against each other. The retail institutions and the poor people themselves will benefit directly from this competition. In 1993, I circulated a proposal that called for $100 million for Grameen Trust to be used for the support of poverty-focused microcredit programs that operated on a retail level in developing countries. The response to my proposal, despite lobbying campaigns by RESULTS volunteers in 7 countries, was not very encouraging. Then one evening in 1993, I received a telephone call from the World Bank. It was Vice President Ismail Sirageldin. Ismail and I had worked together as steering committee members of the Aga Khan Foundation in Geneva, and I knew he was a genuine admirer of Grameen. Despite holding a high position in the World Bank, he had not lost a feel for the poor. How can we help? Is there anything we can do for you? He asked. Well, I don't know. The World Bank only works through governments. You can't work directly with us, I said. No, we very much want to work with you, but you always refuse our money. We don't need your money. We can manage our own. What response are you getting on the $100 million proposal you circulated for the Grameen Trust? Very frustrating experience. Nobody came forward except USAID with $2 million. Did you send a copy of the proposal to the World Bank? No, we didn't. We didn't think you would be interested. Can you fax me a copy tomorrow? I'll see what we can do for you. The next day I faxed the proposal to Ismail. He called me back about a week later. Jubilant! We checked your proposal. We have good news for you. We want to give you the balance of $98 $98 million. I'm delighted to hear that. We thought we'd never find this money. But how are you bypassing the Bangladesh government? Don't worry, we discussed that too. We'll find a way. Let me get this straight, Ismail. Are you talking about a loan or an outright grant? A loan of $98 million, Ismail answered. But Ismail, the trust will never be able to pay back a loan. This is a soft loan with a very long maturity period. It is almost like a grant, Ismail explained. But I know how this works. Soon your official will ask for a guarantee from the government for this loan. And why should our government guarantee a loan to the Grameen Trust knowing that we will give this money to projects in other countries? The trust will never recover the original amount even if loan repayment is 100%. We make projects responsible only for the local currency equivalent of the loan they receive. When they pay back in the local currency, but the World Bank will want US dollars. Because of currency fluctuations, the trust will sometimes receive much less in dollar terms than what was loaned. I see no way we can take a loan, even if it is a soft loan. I see your point, Ismail said. What if we give you the entire money up front? Then you can invest it and earn enough to compensate for the losses through exchange rate fluctuations. I am not an expert on fund management in the international market. I need an expert, I said. Why don't you look into the matter and help us draw up a business plan that will protect both the trust and the World Bank? Ismail promised to do that, but neither his specialists nor the ones I consulted came up with a satisfying scenario. For the time being, the World Bank offered us a grant of $2 million without requiring a government guarantee. This grant did not come from the World Bank's loan fund, but from the President's discretionary fund. To mobilize additional funds for microcredit programs, Ismail created CGAP, which was established with a $30 million grant from the World Bank. There was $30 million grant, GRANT grant, from the World Bank. Though CGAP's first 3 years were far from perfect, it did a lot of good. Ismail followed consultative Group for International Agricultural Research CGIAR guidelines in designing the structure of the CGAP. He proposed the creation of a policy advisory group similar to the technical advisory group of the CGIAR and suggested that I be named chairperson. From that position, I had the opportunity to associate with a diverse group of practitioners and donors working together to set the global stage for microcredit. It was exciting. Though several of the programs that received funding from CGAP did not seem to place enough emphasis on the poorest, 3 leading Grameen replication programs, Card Share, a program in India started with Grameen Trust funding, and Project Dunganon did receive grants. CGAP was quickly followed by CGAP 2 in July 1998. If CGAP 2 can sharpen its focus on the poorest people and adopt a policy to provide most of its funding to national wholesaler funding agencies like PKSF rather than directly funding retailers, I believe its impact will be significant. I also think that a larger percentage of CGAP funds should go directly into the hands of poor women instead of going to consultancies, international conferences, and research studies. In March 1995, a group of volunteers from the citizen advocacy group Results came to visit us in Bangladesh. It was the third such delegation. Results participants pay their own way and are always extremely committed to the fight against poverty. As very few of them are professionally involved in development, they remain untouched by the high salaries and cushy benefits cushy benefits that tend to dull one's compassion for the poor. During one of the sessions with the results volunteers, I brought up our proposal for $100 million in funding for the Grameen Trust. Many of the volunteers had lobbied their governments to make contributions to the Grameen Trust, but in most cases their governments had rejected the idea. Sensing this disappointment in the room, I suggested that we shift our focus. What if we found 1 million persons who would each contribute $100 toward the Grameen Trust's efforts to fund Grameen replication programs? We could call it the People's Fund for Microcredit. Dave Ellis, an educator and philanthropist based in South Dakota, raised his hand to ask a question. He looked very excited. "When are you going to launch this program?" he asked me. I looked at my watch and said, 5 minutes ago. Dave pulled a $100 bill from his wallet and said, "Well, I'm the first one. Now only 999,999 to go." Suddenly, all the other participants started holding up $100 bills. Some who did not have their money with them borrowed from others. In a few minutes, I had more than 20 $100 bills in front of me. It was exhilarating. I announced the People's Fund in Grameen, Dialogue, our quarterly newsletter, and more checks came rolling in from around the world. Thrilled by the success of the People's Fund, Dave hired a public relations firm and worked with it to design a campaign logo, website, brochure, and business plan. During several successive trips to the United States, I met Dave and Jeff Swaim, the creative director of the public relations firm Amherst and Reeves, to discuss the campaign. The idea of linking 1 million people in wealthy countries with millions of poor people in developing countries through microcredit was tremendously exciting to me, not only because of the impact on the borrowers, but also because of the impact on the donors. It would create thousands of people-to-people links and indirectly educate millions about the potential of microcredit. Understandably, Dave did not want to process all the $100 checks through his small, Rapid City-based foundation. So Reed Oppenheimer, a philanthropist and results activist, agreed to establish a US-based non-profit organization called Grameen Foundation USA, GFUSA. Reed paid all the legal costs of setting up GFUSA and based it in his home state of Oklahoma. As we contemplated the campaign's move from Dave's foundation to GFUSA, we recognized an opportunity to establish a broader mandate for GFUSA than simply managing the People's Fund. So I asked Alex Counts, an American who had been associated with us in Bangladesh for nearly 10 years and who had written a book about Grameen entitled Give Us Credit, whether he would move back to the United States to become the executive director of the GFUSA. He agreed. Reed became the chairperson of the board. Alex moved to Washington, where GF USA's main office would be located, and Jeff and Dave continued to work on the campaign. To date, we have only raised $142,000 through the People's Fund and are still trying to raise the funds needed to implement our business plan. Our goal is to raise the campaign budget separately so that 100% of each $100 contribution goes to the Graeme Trust and onto grassroots microcredit programs, with neither GFUSA nor the Graeme Trust retaining any percentage for their administration and overhead. If we can find some foundation, company, or individual willing to fund the plan that Dave and Jeff came up with, I'm sure Alex could multiply that amount many times and in a reasonable amount of time generate $100 million in $100 increments. We have come a long way from the days when we did not know whether Graeme could function outside of Bangladesh. Dozens of projects in countries with very different cultures, climates, and levels of development have shown how versatile our microcredit methodology really is. We have tried our best to spread the word about the power of microcredit and help people who want to start or expand their own projects abroad. To conserve our energy, we have concentrated on projects with a strong poverty focus, but we are convinced that our model can work among non-poor populations as well. Despite these successes, we have only begun to scratch the surface. Millions of families around the world are still victims of unjust economies that do not recognize their right to credit and relegate them to lives of virtual slavery. Relegate, R-E-L-E-G-A-T-E, relegate them to lives of virtual slavery. These are people with untapped potential who suffer the pain of hunger and poverty even though it is avoidable. Microcredit is not a miracle cure that can eliminate poverty in one fell swoop. One fell swoop, S-W-O-O-P, soup. One fell swoop. But it can end poverty for many and reduce its severity for others. Combined with other innovative programs that unleash people's potential, microcredit is an essential tool in our search for a poverty-free world. This is the end of Chapter 9, Applications in Other Poor Countries. On the next episode, I'll read the next chapter, Chapter 10, Applications in the United States and Other Wealthy Countries. But until then, thanks for your curiosity to listen and learn more. Hey, if you have found this audiobook helpful to you, then you can share it with your friends on Facebook or other platforms so that they can benefit from it as well. Because you never know how you end up helping other people by sharing one useful information. So this is really a powerful thing to do. Even if it looks very simple, it does not cost you any money. You just have to click some buttons to share it and it is done. Thanks for listening.